Okay, this is lesson 4.2, and this is one of the most important lessons for everyone to understand. This is a deeper look at your body's terrain, and it helps you understand the importance of detoxification. It helps you understand how we get sick and how our body heals and repairs. So let's start with looking at the generalized structure of a cell. This is what it looks like. Cells that make up our bodies, cells that make up our skin, our hair, our nails, our liver, our muscles, our organs, our heart, all have a similar structure in that there's a cell wall, there's a nucleus. The nucleus is where your genetic code lives, the genetic code that codes for everything that your body needs to grow itself, repair itself, and heal itself. And function on a day-to-day basis is right here. The code is then translated by the cell in here, which is the endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum is making proteins, etc. Out of the code is informing how to make certain proteins, etc. needed for gene expression. And those get packaged and then sent off into the extracellular fluid and or in your capillary network, which then travel to different parts of the body, and our cells communicate through the cell fluid that they sit in. Your cells have a cell wall or a cell membrane. The cell membrane is made up out of fats. It's a phospholipid bilayer. Another important little organ or organelle inside the cell is something called the mitochondria. Mitochondria are really key because this is where energy is created that fuels your entire body. This is where the oxygen molecule, the O2, is split. When we split that molecule, energy is released. The energy is released as heat, as light, as energy. The energy is harnessed into something called ATP, which is what your cells use for fuel. It's the currency for fuel in your body. Also, what happens with normal cellular respiration or the use of oxygen is your antioxidant enzyme system. Your enzyme chains are activated, which also helps the internal environment stay healthy inside here. Okay, now we look at two cells beside each other, and we see that there is something, we just see a little sliver here, something called the extracellular matrix. There's some words right here, got cut off, sorry. The extracellular matrix we can consider to be cell soil. So just like a plant has soil, your cells live in their own cell soil. And this cell soil has fluid in it. It's also a little bit thick. Potentially there's proteins and there's glycoproteins and there's all kinds of stuff in there. But ultimately the cell soil is what's keeping the cells healthy. So the cell soil contains nutrients and oxygen that are delivered by your blood capillary system that is going by the cells. And the nutrients and oxygen can then either be pumped across the cell wall with special little pumps, or it will just diffuse right across the fat tissue and inside the cell, depending on the nature of the thing. And then your cells are also making their own waste and their own garbage and their own things, which then can be deposited or pumped out of the cell into the extracellular matrix. So it is really, really critical that your extracellular matrix stays clean and clear and healthy. If this gets polluted, guess what? Water will tend to stay in this compartment, and this is part of what we call tissue water retention. We can kind of look at something like cellulite as a very obvious inflammatory process where water is held in tissue, and that's causing some dimpling and pulling on the skin. Okay, this is a little rough diagram, but I think it's helpful. So let's say these are cells. These yellow things here are cells. Here's our nucleus, and here's our mitochondria. Of course, this is very, very simplified. This then is the extracellular fluid. Here's your blood capillary that's going by. The blood capillary deposits the oxygen and the nutrients that can then get into the cell. And the cell is producing garbage. Now we have a parallel little vascular system, which is lymph, the lymphatic system. The lymph vessels here I have in green, and lymph vessels are porous and they are mopping up the garbage. They take the garbage out and they try to keep this area clean. So that's really, really key. Also, if there's debris because you were working out and we have a little bit of muscle tearing and ripping, then it cleans that up. If there's been a viral fight or whatever and there's garbage, then the lymphatic system is also going to clean that up. The lymphatic system houses immune system cells as well for cleaning, for repairing, and for fighting things off. All right, here's a more scientific diagram of that. Here we see tissue and a whole bunch of cells. We see a capillary network here. This red area here is oxygenated blood, and we see that this area over here is venous and it's containing deoxygenated blood, which is now blue or purple or dark red, as deoxygenated blood gets, because the tissues have used up the oxygen. And here is the lymphatic system, which is all intermingled in there as the sewer system. It's pretty cool. And we see here on close-up that the lymphatic system is rather a lot more porous. The blood system is not porous. We don't want to be delivering toxins and garbage to the brain, into your lungs and your heart, etc. Nope, that is for the lymphatic system. We also pull back out here and see the distribution of the lymphatic system. We see something curious about the lymphatic system in that it doesn't have a pump. It's not connected to the heart system and the blood capillary system. We see that there's these locations of round things. These are your lymph nodes, and people do seem to be aware that there are lymph nodes and know vaguely that they're connected with your lymph system. So lymph nodes are little sentinels that contain cells of your immune system, so that as the garbage is taken out of the head and neck area, it's being checked. It's being checked for allergens, antigens. It's being checked for viruses and bacteria. And if the fluid contains any of that in the garbage, then the cells inside the lymph nodes will respond and tell each other and round up other white blood cells to help fight off and clear up what it needs to clear up. And that's why in the armpit here, we have the lymph is draining upwards up the arm. So the tissue sewage of the arm is getting drained through lymph nodes here in the elbow and here in the armpit. The breast area is draining through the armpit. And we have a lot around the digestive tract. For the legs, we see a lot of lymph nodes in the groin area as the sewer system is cleaning up and looking at what's coming up from the feet and the lower legs and the upper legs, etc., and the pelvic area. So lymphatic system is pretty cool, but really important that you see that because there's no pump, the only way for the lymphatic system to clear your sewage is for you to move into exercise. And so having a stationary life is terrible for us. I think I heard it being called the new smoking or something, but it's really doing a terrible thing for our bodies. We really are built to be moving all the time and to be having significant exercise challenge. Up until the last, 100 years, life has become very, very sedentary in a way that it never has. So making sure that you move and you exercise very consistently is critical for you to remain healthy. Okay, so this brings us to, well, then what happens to the chemicals? This is where the liver is doing the heavy lifting here in terms of being a critical organ in chemically neutralizing chemicals. Let's look at this a bit more closely. So the lymph system and the blood system, and I'll show you that later, is really through the portal vein is getting and other blood supply, but is getting endotoxins. Endotoxins are toxins and garbage coming from your own cellular metabolism. And then there's also bacterial endotoxins, which is coming from largely your microbiome. And we have lots of microbiomes, but certainly the microbiome in the gut has a lot of bacteria, trillions of cells of bacteria, and they ferment things and they produce a lot of garbage that gets absorbed and then has to go to the liver for cleaning up. Now, we also have exotoxins. Exotoxins are coming from outside the body, and so that can be coming in through drugs and medications, that can be coming in through food and food additives, through agriculture, pesticides and things like that, through household cleaning products and glues and resins and flame retardants, and perfumes and other chemicals we're using in soaps and Teflon and all kinds of stuff. We've got, all of us have about 400 different types of environmental chemicals now commonly present stored in our bodies, in our fat tissue, etc. Why is that? And what is the liver doing? So the liver, inside those cells, has chemistry. Chemistry means that there are enzymes. Enzymes are made by decoding the nucleus, which is directing special enzymes that detoxify chemicals. Enzymes are transforming chemicals into different neutral compounds. So we have something called a phase 1 set of enzymes. They're called cytochrome P450 enzymes. These are the 5 different enzymes right here. They involve oxygen and hydrogen and water, and halogens like chlorines and bromines and iodines, etc. They require to function lots of B vitamins, lots of antioxidants, glutathione, certain branched chain amino acids from proteins, flavonoids, and phospholipids. So where do we get these? We get these from fruits and vegetables. Those are the save your life category of foods. We do get these things also from healthy sources of protein, and we need enough of them to combat our pollution. Now, interestingly, we get a lot more superoxides or free radicals or more dangerous chemicals through the first half of our detox process in the liver. And then those toxins go through a phase 2 set of reactions. And there are 2, 4, 6, 7, there's, depending on how we calculate this, there's 8 to 12 different enzyme things that have to happen over here. And again, we need cofactors for that. So keratines and C and E and selenium, copper, zinc, manganese, CoQ10, thiols, which are sulfur-based compounds found in garlic, onions, cruciferous vegetables, bioflavonoids, which come from fruits, silymarin, which is milk thistle, pycnogenols, lots of antioxidants are needed. And what the liver is trying to do here is it's trying to make the toxin either fat soluble or water soluble. If it can make it water soluble, then the kidneys are going to filter it out and it's going to wind up in your urine. If it is fat soluble, then as the liver is also producing bile, and bile is kind of like soap for fat, breaks down fats into smaller droplets, which allow you to process and absorb them. But your body will try to put fat soluble toxins in with your bile. Your bile will then end up in your intestines. And then in your intestines, hopefully you're going to poop some of that out. Now, your body does like to recycle things like bile instead of having to make all new stuff all the time. So we do reabsorb 75 to 85% of our bile. So it is harder for us to get rid of things like plastics and pesticides and flame retardants and hormones and all of those things. This is an example of phthalates, and we've heard some things about phthalates. We're trying to all avoid phthalates these days, and certainly in Europe they've been banned. So for example, routes of exposure, skin absorption through lotions and shampoos and laundry, detergents and flooring, ingestion through foods and packaging for foods and in the water, is present in dust, air pollution, and tire particles. Phthalates are found in PVC flooring, food packaging, fragrances, personal care products, carpet backing, faux leather, which is in anything faux leather, medical devices. And we see that phthalate exposure has impacts on lots of different tissues in the body. So brain tissue, fat soluble, interestingly, neuroinflammatory responses can be produced by environmental toxins as well as microbes and viruses. And guess what? That affects cognition, that affects mood. I have seen people with brain on fire, with anxiety, depression, and all kinds of things like that going on, which is more of a physiological issue than it is a psychological issue. ADHD, there's more sensitivity potentially, can impact thyroid, can impact the cardiovascular system and the fragile lining of the vessels, can impact reproductive health, lungs, etc. Detoxification of phthalates does happen partly in phase 1, does happen partly in phase 2. And we need these genes to be functioning properly in order to produce the appropriate enzymes to be able to detox. And this is where the topic of genetic SNPs comes into play, where if we look at personalized genetics, we may see that we may have a bum copy of some of these genes, and that we are underproducing the amount of enzyme needed to detoxify a certain pollutant or chemical, and that means our body will tend to bioaccumulate some of those things, and that can be why some people get sick with certain things and other people don't. Very, very fascinating to look at underlying causes of chronic disease. If we think of Parkinson's, we think of ALS, for example, we know that there's neurological inflammation happening. We know that the immune system is having an inflammatory response, potentially trying to clear a toxin that it can't figure out. It's having trouble finding a way to eliminate it. The immune system is dysregulated. It's attacking the wrong thing. And certainly that can be toxin related, and it can be microbe related. Okay. Now, certainly we can talk about other evidence of when our systems start to slow down or get bunged up or start getting congested. So, for instance, what happens if our lymphatic system gets bogged down? What happens if our liver gets overloaded and our enzyme pathways get overloaded and we don't have enough nutrient antioxidant resources to keep up with our exposure levels? What happens? And so this is where we have too much toxicity, and too much toxicity can then oxidize the cell wall and can get into the cell and can oxidize the nucleus and damage nuclear functioning genes, gene control, and that is carcinogenic, that is cancer, can impact energy production, can be mitochondrially toxic and damage our energy production. And this can mess up lots of processes in here, which can then impact the nucleus and also impact the carcinogenic process. So when we look at root causes, we need to make sure our organs of elimination are functioning properly. We're having bowel movements. Our lymphatic system is not getting bogged down. Our kidneys aren't getting bogged down. Our liver isn't getting congested or bogged down or chemically overloaded. We need to make sure our digestive system is working properly to absorb all of the nutrients that we are eating. We need to make sure we're eating the appropriate things that we need. So, for instance, mitochondrial dysfunction occurs when there is mitochondrial toxicity happening, too much inflammation, too much garbage. And what we can see with mitochondrial dysfunction, or evidence of that, are persistent brain fog, diminished cognitive processing, impaired short-term and long-term memory formation, recurrent headaches and debilitating migraines, coordination issues, fine motor control issues, heightened sensory activity, particularly to light and sound. So this sounds like a lot of different things, right? And this happens in different conditions. And now we know that part of what's happening is that there's mitochondrial function harm going on. And certainly we can see the muscular system being impacted. Maybe we have fibromyalgia, persistent muscle pain, because we have a chronic inflammatory response in our connective tissue because our toxins are stored there, for example, and on it can go. Different causes of mitochondrial dysfunction: infection and inflammation, toxin exposure, nutrient deficiencies, oxidative stress, genetic and epigenetic factors, lifestyle, environmental factors, chronic stress, sleep deprivation, being too sedentary or overtraining, our hormones being out of whack, can all put our system out of balance in lots of different ways, impact cellular function. And we start to see things repeating. So causes of chronic inflammation, we see kind of the same things: head infection, food triggers, gut health, environmental toxins, metabolic and mitochondrial dysfunction, lifestyle triggers, and other activators of the immune system. We see stressors, trauma that impact our hormonal system and our nervous system, which can then drive inflammatory responses. Of course, here looking at cellular damage and cancer, we see that chronic inflammation, this is causing a ton of oxidative stress for cells. Oxidative kind of means like rusting or breaking down. Oxidative stress can come from chronic inflammation. It can come from toxicity. It can come from radiation. Certainly our diet can produce oxidative stress and inflammatory stress as well if we're eating too many saturated fats and sugars and chemicals and food coloring and processed foods. If our liver is getting overwhelmed because we have too high exposure, or we have too much stress, or we have genetic SNPs, genetic sensitivity with some of our detox pathways. Hormonal imbalances can impact the speed of everything happening, how fast detoxification happens. So if our thyroid is sluggish, we start losing estrogen and we get more inflammation because estrogen is anti-inflammatory. Hormones are really important to keeping everything in balance. Stress and nervous system balance, trauma can throw off our hormonal system, which can then throw off our inflammatory systems, which then cause more oxidative stress, which also impairs detoxification. Infections, we see with COVID, right? That infections can certainly disrupt how our immune system is functioning and then breed chronic inflammation, breed oxidative stress, impact our detoxification ability, etc. COVID was impacting mentally, emotionally too, triggering things like depression and anxiety. Then we have genomic instability. So this is the SNPs that I was talking about, and epigenetic triggers. So the environment impacting the genes and stressors impacting gene function. And certainly we've been talking a lot about environmental toxins. So we see that everything is kind of all interconnected. And that's the beauty of looking at root cause, is that we are looking for which systems need the most TLC. And once we start cleaning up inflammation, increasing antioxidant regeneration, cleaning up the diet, improving detoxification, getting the hormones back in balance, calming the nervous system down, getting rid of toxins and getting rid of chronic infection or microbiome dysbiosis, then our body has a significant ability to heal, repair, and rebalance. Okay, so this was initially talking about detoxification, but it's also talking about why detoxification is important, how we get sick, and how we get better. So just to reiterate, your liver is the thing that chemically neutralizes toxins. Your kidneys filter out water-soluble toxins. I will say the bile is part of eliminating fat-soluble toxins. The colon is pooping out those fat-soluble toxins. The lungs are there to expel gaseous waste products. The skin is actually a wonderful way of helping us eliminate fat-soluble toxins and heavy metals. And then our lymphatic system is really serving as the extracellular matrix and cellular sewer system with your immune system also as part of it, checking things. So when we talk about detox, we are supporting the liver. We are supporting the liver by using extra support often, giving your liver all the cofactors it needs. Sometimes we're stimulating bile production, and we're also using herbs that regenerate and heal the liver and help it purge itself. The kidneys, we are supporting kidney detoxification by drinking the appropriate amount of water, using herbs that support kidney function. The colon, we are ensuring that you have a healthy microbiome, that you have fiber so that your healthy gut flora has appropriate food for themselves, and you have daily bowel movements. Daily is really important. Exercise and movement is really important as well. Lungs, also supported by exercise and breath work. Skin is supported by infrared saunas and exercise. The lymphatic system is supported by exercise, skin brushing, rebounding, hydration, lymphatic massage, lymphatic herbs. So we're seeing exercise as being pretty critical here, right? And isn't it interesting that it's the one thing that we as humans tend to brush off a fair bit and not prioritize, but it is really critical for having a human body. Okay, so the 7 steps to physiological healing. This is sort of one idea. There's other details here for sure, but we can sort of break things down into 7 ideas, let's say, and everyone will have a different order of process depending on what's going on for them. So in order to repair physiology and to heal the body from chronic illness, we need, first and foremost, as a foundation, is we need enough energy to be able to detoxify. So depending, we may be tonifying and rebuilding the mitochondria so that we have energy to clean up. If we have enough energy to clean up, then we're going to clean up first. The cleaning up process and the tonifying process usually really helps get the inflammation down and helps to regulate the immune system. Part of that is going to be restoring the gut function and the microbiome, balancing hormonal systems and neurotransmitter systems may be a piece of what someone needs as their healing path. Definitely sorting out any underlying microbiome imbalance, chronic viral infection, getting rid of toxin load and environmental stressors are key to healing. And then it's regenerate, optimize, and maintenance. And we stay well. Okay, so this was a longer lesson. I hope that it was helpful and you get a lot out of it, because this is really the quick foundations of understanding your health, your body, how your body works, how you get sick, and what the process is to heal and repair.